Do you believe in chance or coincidence? So, what is this terrible club of 27? How can the Simpsons predict the future? Or why in the Philippines, when the song My Way by Frank Sinatra is played in a bar, it immediately triggers deadly fights? Sit back and relax. Here are 12 of the strangest coincidences in the world. Meeting your soulmate is something that usually happens when you are a teenager or an adult. But this newly married British couple had met long before when they were both children, except they didn't know it yet. They thought they had met for the first time when they were grown up until one day they were flipping through a photo album and discovered a photo of them playing just a few feet apart on a beach in Cornwall. Amy Maiden, 25, and her husband, Nick Wheeler, 26, had met 20 years earlier without knowing it. Amy was building a sandcastle while her future husband sat in front of her, only a few feet away. Of course, the families didn't know each other at all and had no contact in the meantime. The craziest part is that they didn't even live in Cornwall. They were both on vacation in the same place. The couple ended up meeting and getting married again in a church only a minute away from where the photo was taken. Surviving a disaster is already a surreal thing, but surviving the two biggest nuclear disasters of all time is a miracle. Tsutomu Yamaguchi is the only man to have survived Hiroshima and Nagasaki within 3 days of each other. This Japanese man survived the bombing of Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, and then that of Nagasaki. He was 29 years old at that time. He survived, but continued to suffer the side effects of the bombs on his health. He finally succumbed to cancer in 2010. How come he suffered from both of them? Well, simply because Tsutomu Yamaguchi was in the wrong place at the wrong time twice in a row. He was a shipyard engineer for Mitsubishi and was in Hiroshima on a mission. On August 6, 1945, on his way home from the station, the American bomber Enola Gay dropped its first nuclear bomb. Tsutomu was not well. He was stunned, lost consciousness, his arms and part of his face were burned. He was immediately transferred to intensive care, but 3 days later barely recovered from his injuries while he was at home in Nagasaki and telling his colleagues about the terrible tragedy he had suffered. The second American nuclear bomb fell on his head. Tsutomu was not one of the thousands of people who lost their lives. He died at the age of 93 from stomach cancer. Believe it or not, but years before the Titanic sank on the night of April 14th, 15th, 1912, two works of fiction had predicted this catastrophe in the most disturbing details. Sad fate or predicted catastrophe. On March the 22nd, 1886, a journalist by the name of William Thomas Stead recounted in a short story entitled How the Mail Steamer Went Down in Mid-Atlantic by a Survivor how the Titan was going to sink in the Atlantic. Because according to him, these liners were sent to sea with too few lifeboats. The difference is that his ship collided with another ship. 12 years later, the American writer Morgan Robertson wrote The Wreck of the Titan, or Futility, and this time the similarities are really but striking. In it, he will talk about a collision with an iceberg, and he too will talk about the lack of boats on board. The fictional novel, it is important to note, only became successful after the real Titanic tragedy. While some people think it was obvious as a car accident, others still see it as a disturbing prediction. Do you know the 27 Club? It is a tragic club that gathers public and famous personalities, all having in common to have died at the fateful age of 27 years. The first to have triggered the creation of this club were Brian Jones, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Jim Morrison. Alan Wilson, whose deaths were very close together in the space of 2 years between 1969 and 1971. Then it was around Ron Pigpen, Dave Alexander, Gary Thane, Boone, Kurt Cobain, and many other personalities, all of whom died from different causes. The last person to have been part of the 27 Club is the singer Amy Winehouse, who died because of an overdose. Before this tragic event, the club was not very popular and only regained its notoriety after the death of the singer. This time I think it's more of a coincidence because each one died in a different way. And you? What do you think? In 1975, a 17-year-old boy was killed while riding his moped in Bermuda. A cab driver accidentally hit and killed him while he was playing with his bike. His brother was killed a year later, to the day, while riding the same bike in the same intersection by the same cab, driven by the same driver, carrying the same passenger he was carrying in the first accident. This story caused great controversy at the time. Many people did not believe in it, but later opinions differed on the subject. To kill two people of the same family on the same road, 1 year apart, you really have to have found your driver's license in a surprise birthday bag, or these brothers are really unlucky. Everyone knows that The Simpsons have the gift of predicting many things, and when the creators of The Simpsons were asked to explain, they naturally replied that it was chance. Except that even chance refuses to believe it, predicting the Nobel Prize for Bengt Holmström, Disney's takeover of Century Fox, connected watches, the Greek crisis, Lady Gaga's choreography at the Super Bowl, or Ebola virus. We want to believe in it, but Donald Trump's election victory, his climb up the escalators, that hand gesture? On April the 15th, 1865, President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated in Washington, D.C. On September the 19th, 1881, President James Garfield was shot in Elkton. And on September the 14th, 1901, President William McKinley was killed by the anarchist Leon Czolgosz. So far, nothing really strange. But what you didn't know is that at all three of these tragic events, Robert Todd Lincoln, the eldest son of the 16th President of the United States and U.S. Ambassador to the United Kingdom, was present. In the first assassination, he was at his father's beside. In the second, Robert Lincoln was at the Washington, D.C. train station. And in the third, he was at the Pan American Exposition when McKinley was fatally shot twice. Are you thinking about the same thing I am? Tell me about it in the comments. A man named Theman Brown and his wife, Kimberly, were a very happy couple. They had a good life, but something happened to spoil their romance. One day, after 10 years of living together, they discovered that they were not only soulmates, but that they were biologically brother and sister. The worst part is that they had 2 children since their incestuous union. They met in 2008, got married in 2011, and had their first child the same year. They had their youngest in 2015. I wouldn't want to be in their shoes. In June 2001, on a small farm in Staffordshire, a 10-year-old girl named Laura Buxton was celebrating her grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary. At one point, at her grandfather's request, Laura Buxton wrote a note on a balloon. Please return it to Laura Buxton with her address. She then dropped the balloon. 2 days later, the unthinkable happened. A few miles from Laura's little farm, a farmer was tending to his cattle in a field when he came across the deflated balloon on his neighbor's hedge. He reads the note and remembers that their daughter's name was Laura Buxton. He gave it to them, thinking it was her. The second Laura Buxton was also 10 years old. When she received the ball, she wrote a letter to the recipient explaining that her name was also Laura Buxton. Following this very strange exchange, the two Laura decided to meet. They were 3 hours away from each other, but they had a lot in common, except for their ages and their common names. The two Laura Buxtons were the same height, which by the way was not common as they were both well above average for their age. They both had blue eyes, they were dressed that day in the same outfit, pink t-shirt and jeans, both had braids in their hair, both were in the 5th grade, and most amazingly, they both had dogs of the same breed, sex, and age. 3-year-old female black Labradors, as well as rabbits and guinea pigs with orange spots on their hind legs. So many similarities that no one has been able to explain to this day. But tell us if you think it's a huge coincidence or a powerful force that controls it all. In the Philippines, singing Sinatra's My Way is like risking your life. In recent years, several fights and deadly brawls have broken out by chance while singing the song in karaoke bars. Today, nobody can explain this strange phenomenon. Some see these deaths as natural consequence of the national culture of violence, alcoholism, and machismo. Others attribute it to the arrogant nature of the song. Others think that there is something sinister about it, while others think that it is due to the poor way in which this song is performed, something that touches the pride of Filipinos when it comes to their gift for singing and awakens in them an urge to fight. Absurd? In China, in the village of Shivan in Jiangjing, Jiangsu province, an 80-year-old man saved an 8-year-old boy from drowning. It happened one morning around 9 a.m. when the boy accompanied his grandmother to collect water chestnuts by the river accidentally fell in. Xu Wenfang heard the cries of the boy struggling and clinging to life, waving his hands at the surface of the water. With the help of his wife, the octogenarian managed to pull the boy out of the water and saved him in extremis. The funniest part of the story, even though it's not really funny, is that 30 years earlier, the same man had saved the boy's father from the same river. Maybe it's time they learned to swim in this family. On July 4, 1826, two former U.S. presidents, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, died within hours of each other. On that day, America was celebrating 50 years of independence. Thomas Jefferson was 83 years old, while John Adams was 90. Both were ill, but to die on the same day, no one saw that coming. Many Americans saw the two deaths as a coincidence, and many saw evidence of divine design at work.